It's time for Recipe of the Day. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I have just the recipe for you. This is pork loin carnitas. I am going to say right off the bat that I do not usually do any kind of slow braise with pork loin meat because it's just not as juicy and luscious as a shoulder, pork butt, that kind of thing. However, years ago, a company asked me to develop a recipe for them for pulled pork made from pork tenderloins. And I actually found that when you take the loin meat and braise it in a good, flavorful liquid, it can turn out quite good. And so I use that technique with the pork loin, so not the tenderloin, the pork loin, and it actually does work really well. I'm going to be honest and say my preference is always going to be the pork butt for pulled pork, for carnitas, for anything like this. But if you want something a little leaner, if the pork loins are on sale and that's what you've got, you're going to actually really, really love this recipe. I know it. So first, what are carnitas? They are a Mexican dish made of braised and then pulled pork with some spices. Traditionally, there is lard involved, but I've just used some regular cooking oil to sear the pork. And then there's beautiful flavors. There's broth, there's some citrus, and then chipotles in adobo in there. Just so much flavor. That is a small can that you get in the international section of the grocery store or where like the Mexican foods are. And inside are these chipotle peppers that have been smoked and then packed in this sauce. And they have so much flavor. They transform everything you put them in. So that is one of the keys to making this dish delicious. And it is just essentially a slow cooked meat that's then shredded. And then you can use it in a variety of ways. It's wonderful just served with some rice and black beans, but it's also really great in tacos, on taco salad, or like a burrito bowl, burritos, enchiladas, quesadillas. Anything like that is going to be delicious with these pork loin carnitas. Okay, how do you make them? You're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are starting on the stove and then they're going to braise in the oven. You're going to heat 2 tablespoons of oil in a large Dutch oven or some kind of pot that has a lid, and you want that over medium-high heat. And then you're adding the pork to that and searing it on all sides. I'm looking at this recipe now and it does not say to salt the pork before searing it. I'm going to go and edit the recipe as soon as I'm done recording this, and you need to know that definitely you're going to season that pork loin before you sear it in that Dutch oven. So backing up, you are going to heat the oil, season the pork loin, a 3-pound pork loin, all over with salt, and then it's going into that oil and searing for about 4 minutes per side, just until a crust has formed and you're sort of turning it in the oil. Then turn the burner off and you're going to add a cup of chicken stock, the juice of 1 orange, which is about 1/3 of a cup if you're measuring it from a container, the juice of 1 lime, which is about 2 tablespoons if you're measuring that from something else. You could use lemon juice instead of lime, but I really like the lime in here. And then you're also adding the full 7-ounce can of chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. Stir that up around the pork, kind of roll the pork around in it, and then put the lid on and put it into the oven that you had preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is going in until the pork is nice and tender so you can pull it apart with a fork. That's going to be about 2 hours. Then you're going to take the pork out of the pot and you're going to use 2 forks to shred that meat up. And then you can add some of the liquid that it was cooking in, just as much as you want for like taste and for liquidiness. It kind of depends on what you're using it for, how much of that liquid you want to add. Give it a taste and add some salt and pepper if you'd like. It really kind of comes down to how salty your chicken stock was, how much salt you're going to want to add here. That's the issue. And then I will also say that if you want your carnitas to be a little bit crispy, which is something that I really do enjoy, you want to add not very much of that liquid, and then you're going to actually spread out your shredded pork on a big pan and put it under the broiler just for a couple of minutes. Watch it the whole time until a bit of a crust is forming on the edges, and then that's going to add that little bit of crispiness to the little bits of the edges edges of the pork, and you're going to have the juicy meat, that juicy flavor with those chipotles and adobo, the citrus flavors, and those little crispy bits. It's going to be so good as part of your dinner tonight or as part of maybe Taco Tuesday in a couple of days. I cannot wait for you to try this. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is May 5th of 2026. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast recipe of the day, I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.